everyone. A warm welcome to everyone here tonight. I'm Tina Williams, the Wellington Branch Chair of Te Kāhui Whaihanga, New Zealand Institute of Architects, and it's really wonderful to be able to welcome everyone here tonight. The idea of doing something like this to remember Megan Wraight has been in the works for a little while, so it's been really great to see all this come together. And it also wasn't intentional, but it also seems pretty special that we find ourselves in the time of Matariki, which of course sees the rising of the Pōhutukawa star, which feels particularly relevant tonight. Thanks for bringing this event together goes of course to Nicole Thompson and the New Zealand Institute of Landscape Architects. We're really pleased to be able to work together on this and are so thankful for your support. I've just realised I've missed housekeeping, so in the unlikely event of an emergency, please follow the instructions of the venue Wellington Safety Wardens. Nicole has also nominated herself as a warden, so please follow her in a panic. Exits are well marked, but please take a moment to familiarise yourself with the exit nearest to you. It's over there. If we are required to evacuate the venue, then please assemble outside the Michael Fowler Centre on Lower Cooper Street, across the road. In the event of an earthquake, please follow the procedure of drop, cover, hold. Please do not evacuate unless instructed to do so by the Wellington venue staff wardens, that's Nicole and others. And if you require first aid, or in case of medical emergency, please let one of the venue or catering team know and they can assist. I think that's also Nicole. So she's just go to Nicole, she'll know what to do. And there are also bathrooms located up the stairs and down the stairs. I'm sure you'll find them. So for those of you who knew Megan, well, this is a moment to share some of the memories which demonstrate an extraordinary life. For those who may not have known Megan, it's a chance to acknowledge the enduring relevance of her work here in Te Whanganui Atara. In the 90s, cities across the world were opening up their waterfronts to the public. And in Wellington, Megan, in collaboration with many others, was one of the people making it a joyous space and place and pushing world-leading designs. I expect all of you would have experienced the generosity of Taranaki Wharf, enjoyed the environmental immersion of the handy wharf hole, maybe even done a sick jump off the famous diving board in the waterfront, or perhaps discovered the intriguing story of Waitangi Park's wetlands. Megan had a hand in them all. And so without further ado, I'd like to welcome the New Zealand Institute of Landscape Architects representative, Sophie, to say a few words before we get underway.
Supposed to be without further ado at Nicole, but I just wanted to have a quick introduction. My name's Sophie Jakes. Tonight I represent the New Zealand Institute of Landscape Architects. This is the very first time we've joined forces with the NZIA to bring you a city talk in its 10 plus years of running. So it's with great pleasure and joy that it's a talk about Megan with her mates. It couldn't be more fitting for our first financial contribution and collaboration with all our architectural friends. So without further ado, Nicole.
Okay, challenge number 1. Oh, I think, yep, here we go. I thought I wasn't going to cry, but I will try and hold back the tears, but I might do a little bit of sobbing in a moment. Nau mai, haere mai, ki te kōrero o tēnei pō. Nā mihi nui te kāhui whaihanga me tuia pito ora. Nā mihi nui kia Megan Wraight me tōna whānau a Paul Ransfield. Rauwa ko Wawe Ransfield, who I believe is online watching tonight. He kai hoa hoa tai ao aho. And E mahi ana o ki Wraight, mena hoa. For those of you who don't know me, I'm a landscape architect at Wraight & Associates, the practice that Megan founded here in Te Whanganui-a-Tara in 2003. Some acknowledgements first. Thank you both to the NZ Institute of Architects and NZ Institute of Landscape Architects. You think we could sort of combine those together to make it easier to say, but anyway, for making tonight's conversation possible. Hopefully we get to have some laughs along the way as we celebrate both the work and the woman who helped shape some of New Zealand's most beloved spaces. Okay, here we go. Huge shout out to Paul and Wawe Ransfield, Megan's husband and daughter. Apologies that this has been so long in the making. Acknowledgements also to Anna and Michael, Megan's late parents, her siblings, Tim, Brenda, John and Erina, and to her extended whānau of aunts, uncles, in-laws, nieces and nephews, of whom there are a multitude. In this photo, oh yep, that's sharing properly, Megan's the one on the far left, standing next to her older sister Brenda, who's holding on to Erina. To Brenda's right is John, the second youngest in the family, and hopefully I've got this right, I'm pretty sure that's Tim, the swarthy teenager, the eldest of the mob on the far right. And lastly, thank you all for making time out of your busy lives to be a part of tonight's revelry. It seems particularly special gathering together here tonight in Te Whanganui-a-Tara, Wellington, a city that always seemed, if not Megan's official tūranga waiwai, to represent a spiritual homeland for her. She absolutely loved this city and was constantly reminding me of its great many attributes. Its magnificent harbour, its proximity to astonishing nature and awesome weather. It wasn't actually in Wellington that I first met Megan, it was in my hometown, Sydney. She was visiting her good friend, Penny Allen, who just happened to be my boss at the time. I knew of Megan long before I met her in person. She was quite famous in the Australian university circles as a hugely proactive agitator, organising student conferences with her cohort of RMIT comrades. A real rabble-rouser, interested in exploring ideas, an enthusiastic change maker, and altogether dynamic doer. In short, she had quite a formidable reputation. So, you can imagine our excitement when she and her then boyfriend, Paul, burst into our office of beige bureaucracy in an explosion of colour and radiant energy. If memory serves, Megan was in a red fake fur bolero jacket, and Paul, okay, I probably am making stuff up here a little bit because I can't quite remember the outfit, but I'm going to guess it was something vivid and possibly in velvet or velour. Anyway, one thing led to another, and I found myself seconded to what was then Megan Wraight Landscape Architects, later to become Wraight & Associates, for a month, working with Megan on our first crack at the Suter Gallery in Nelson. It was truly electrifying to be in Wellington, working with this absolute design dynamo, meeting her network of equally amazing design collaborators, some of whom you'll even be hearing from tonight, and exploring this new world of Aotearoa. At the end of an intensive month working on the Suter project, the most amazing thing happened. Megan took me on a 4-day tiki tour of the South Island. This is a picture of my living room wall, possibly not what you're expecting tonight. It's not a landscape, but it does demonstrate for you not just the love that I have for Megan and her family, but just what an awesome time we had together. This is not a shrine. I didn't put it up after Megan died. It's been up for a long, long time. And one fabulous thing about it is, although when I started it, Wawe wasn't alive, she has definitely contributed to it. So the painting that you can see in the bottom of the screen is one that Wawe painted when she was perhaps 2 or 3, I think. So thank you, Wawe. So we had this trip. We stayed at her big sister Brenda's Orinoco farm in the Motory Hills, visited her parents in Motueka, her other sister Erina on Rabbit Island, her brother Tim at his Mapua Inlet studio. Then Brenda lent us her car. You don't understand how amazing this was to an Australian who comes from a country where people don't really talk to each other. So we took Brenda's car over the Takaka Hill, where we stayed with Megan's friend Darren and his family in Collingwood. We went on a 4-wheel drive tour of the Farewell Spit just because I had mentioned to Megan upon landing that I had seen the most incredible slither of land flying while I was flying over the South Island, and was completely fascinated by it. And then best of all, we got chased out of the closed down Golden Bay cement works whilst exploring the crazy gantries and imagining living in the huge 6-pack silo up on the hill. What a thrill. And here's Megan, bottom left, displaying quite a fetching mullet, if I do say so. When Tina Williams first approached me and asked whether an event such as this might be a good idea, I very quickly arrived at the conclusion that firstly, I needed to make sure that Megan's family were comfortable with the idea. Thankfully, they were. And then secondly, it seemed to me that to capture a 360 view of Megan's character and her professional achievements, one voice just wasn't going to cut it. We are, after all, multifaceted beings constantly adapting our responses to the context and conditions in which we find ourselves. So it seems sensible to enlist the help of others, primarily Megan's co-conspirators, comrades, collaborators, colleagues, and confidants. The number of people with whom Megan engaged and worked over the years is huge, and I'm sure that there are other voices, perhaps here in the audience or online tonight, that while they may not be having an official speaking part tonight, have important recollections and observations to share. Should that be the case, I'm hoping we'll have some time after our last speaker to open up the floor for comment. Failing that, there will be nibbles and drinks after the talky bit for those who are here at the Michael Fowler Centre, keen to carry on the conversation. Sorry to those of you who are online, bad luck. Better luck next time. Despite appearances thus far, there are other speakers tonight, and I promise I'm going to introduce them shortly. But before we get to the main event, I thought I could perhaps share a little more of the Megan I knew. When I refloated the idea of this talk to Paul a few weeks ago now, he reminded me of Megan's capacity for serious fun. He used the word folly. I hope you can understand my Australian accent. I don't think I articulated that. Folly. Which at first threw me as my mind immediately went to visions of Shumi's red follies in Parc de la Villette. At this point, I wasn't quite grasping the connection. Paul clarified, you know, Nicole, how she always included something a bit cheeky in her design, something unexpected, slightly frivolous, something meant to eke a smile or a giggle. The example he used was a secret water fountain. This was in a client's property on the Kapiti coast that was activated by a motion sensor. Now, this water fountain squirts water at one's ankle as one passes by, unwittingly wetting visitors to the property. I think this is an aspect of her character that goes back to her upbringing in a family of playful pranksters and joyful jokesters. She was always looking for an opportunity to create a bit of fun, and it wasn't always for the sole benefit of the clients or future punters. Sometimes it was a subtle code that perhaps only a handful of people would ever know about. It may come as a surprise to some of you to know that one such covert coding is embedded in Waitangi Park. Completed in March 2006, this project represents a significant career milestone for those of us lucky enough to have worked on it, for which we have the co-conceived creation of Megan and John Hardwick-Smith to thank. As a project, it was no walk in the park. Beset by a raft of challenges from its inception to completion, the fact that the finished product so closely resembles the original competition drawings is a testament to the intelligence of Megan and John's cunning design. Some of you may remember the tumultuous days back in the dark ages of 2002, when the winning design submission for Schaefer's Park, as it was then known, was met with a tide of derision and opposition from a range of concerned citizens and community groups for a variety of reasons, mostly worried about the dreadful swamp that was going to emerge with the daylighting of Waitangi Stream. Now, although the trauma of the project's early stages had largely dissipated by the time the park was in its last months of construction in late 2005, the memory of visceral opposition and shouted insults were not entirely forgotten. So, it's a real testament to Megan's character that when given the opportunity to send a secret and potentially vitriolic rebuttal to the park's naysayers in the form of a barcoded message in the tiled detailing of the park's skate bowl, she instead chose whimsy and a gentle joke. While it may not seem that funny to others, to those of us in the office at the time, and Dickon will attest to that, to some of us to this day it gives good giggle. The word slutty bark fast repeatedly circumnavigates the tiled rim of the bowl in barcode language. Fans of Douglas Adams' science fiction classic Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy will no doubt be aware that Slutty Bartfast is a character in the series famous for designing the fjords of Norway. A very rude sounding, but ultimately totally benign word that to this day tickles me to my core. That said, I'm not sure we would have gone in that particular direction had the famous authors, had he stuck with his original name for the character. I'm fairly confident that we would have gone in an entirely different direction had Adam stuck with this. Perhaps we would have saved that for a more worthy cause, perhaps a private garden, a golf course, say, perhaps somewhere in Florida. And clearly, we'd have been offered that sweet gig. Definitely, this is the right crowd to do a job like that. Now, finally, onto the main event. It is my absolute delight to introduce tonight's speakers, all of whom have graciously agreed to lead tonight's river of recollections and meandering of musings. I will say that this is an intentionally curated collective, but is by no means choreographed. We have 5 speakers, each of whom have been asked to regale us for 10 minutes, none of whom have given me any real clue as to what might be coming out of their cake holes. I've probably already gone over my 10 minutes. So, kicking us off, the OG slashy himself, John Hardwick-Smith, farmer, fisherman, but mostly architect at Asfield Architects, who, with Megan in 2003, established what I call, well, no, not what I, it is what I call Wraight Asfield Landscape and Architecture, but what I recently discovered is officially just called Wraight Asfield Landscape Architecture. I'm still surprised that there's no and. And also otherwise known as Walla. Together, Megan and John co-conceived some of this country's seminal public spaces, including the previously mentioned Waitangi Park, as well as Pukeahu National War Memorial Park here in Wellington, and Hayman Park in Auckland. Following John, we'll be inviting Megan's fellow of the NZILA and sometime co-conspirator, sometimes competitor, Ralph Johns, to the mic. Ralph can correct me if I'm wrong here, but I'm guessing he and Megan first crossed paths at Victoria University's then prepubescent program of landscape architecture in the early 2000s, where he was a senior lecturer and Megan tutored and lectured from time to time, and at one time was an adjunct professor. Originally from Wales, Ralph has been bewitched, much like Megan, by this city of charms, enough anyway to have made it his home for over 20 years. Then, hold on to your seats, people. Renowned ecological engineer and energetic guerrilla gardener, Wellington's own three-water boy wonder, Stu Farrant from Morphin Environmental. We'll be taking the stage. Stu is an avid advocate for sustainability, and we're hugely fortunate that the climate here in Wellington, I talk a lot about climate, apologies, is so incredibly awesome that he left the ordinariness of Australia's east coast to repatriate back home to NZ, just so he could be here tonight. On the back of his national tour as the co-recipient of this year's NZIA Gold Medal Award, we're exceedingly privileged to have Hugh Tennent of Tennent Brown Architects join us. Hugh has very graciously shrugged off what I can only imagine has been an exhausting few months of medal talks to join us tonight, possibly representing one of Megan's longest design collaborations. I'm hoping Hugh will divulge how it was that he and Megan first met and recognise their shared design ethos. No pressure. And to finish, we'll be hearing from Jan Bieringa, whose surname I'm still sure to be mispronouncing even after 20 years of knowing her, because she is far too kind to point out my shortcomings. Many of you may know Jan for her energetic support of the arts and environmental causes in Wellington, or perhaps be familiar with the culturally iconic documentary films she and her late husband Luke Bieringa co-created, such as Arns Vestra, Private Journeys, Public Signposts. I think it's fair to say that to Megan, Jan, as well as being our landlord for many years, pretty sure that's not my phone, was a staunch friend and quite often impartial sounding board for ideas, and to this day remains the patron saint of Wraight and Associates. Yeah, I'm almost done, don't worry. Now, while I might have failed on the gender balance maths tonight, I think Megan would forgive me. I know that she held each of tonight's speakers in high regard, and although she would no doubt be slightly mortified by all of the fuss, I think she would be truly delighted to know that we have come together tonight to acknowledge her, the work and the tenacity with which it was executed. I will now give custody of the microphone to John Hardwick-Smith.
Thanks, Nicole. Kia ora koutou. And kia ora Paul and Megan's family and friends, which I'm sure are quite a few in this room. I was talking to Paul last week, and it's a particular, with Matariki this week and Megan's birthday last week, I understand, is significance in a time to remember Megan. I feel very honoured to be in this group of mates and musings. But I have to say I'm not a natural public muser, so I have got some notes here, which I'm probably going to read, I think. Now, that's not quite the same image that Nicole had, but it's a very similar one. And I think, which is the office, WAR office, and I think 2015 or something like that. And I think Dickens still just winning the biggest smile thing. And I did have the idea of trying to make a photo here with a composite of some of the many collaborations that I was aware of, but of course one page is just way too small for that. So I've got this one here. Megan was a consummate collaborator and gathered an amazing network of thinkers and instigators, makers and doers as partners across a huge range of work projects. She had a real head for recognising and inspiring complementary minds, hearts, skills, personalities. Her endeavour and her unique talent and generous spirit was headhunted in return. Although she collaborated with an ever-expanding and diverse group of people, she remained very loyal and committed to a few core groups for particular projects, and I feel very lucky to have been a part of one of those for 20 or so years. And acknowledge and extend a mihi to Megan's many other collaborators here in the room. In the late 90s, Megan was involved in the Wellington Waterfront Concept Plan, alongside some other urban heavy hitters from that time, including Stuart Niven, Ath, Chris MacDonald, Graham McIndoe, Penny Allen, and I think some others. As a follow-up to that, I started working with her on Taranaki Wharf area, and in early 2000s we formed Wala, as Nicole was saying, which was a joint venture between Megan's office, which at that stage was just her, and Athfield's, to lead the design of Waitangi Park. It was actually to make a semi-plausible platform on which to go into the competition at that stage, but it survived. And a bit later, Pukeahu Park and others, and some still continuing today. At that stage, Megan was operating solo without a working address in Wellington, so she spent a fair bit of time up at Athfield's. She complemented the mix. She arrived with the same colour that Nicole described there in the office there. She complemented the mix of interests we all had in exploring connections between people, architecture, landscape, cities and community. A bit like Ath, while she was very driven, serious and earnest about greater causes, she was also very irreverent and very funny, and she couldn't resist a cheeky dig. Mostly project managers, sometimes clients, mayors, ministers of culture and heritage. Megan and Paul cemented a long-term connection with the Hill, and to this day they still have their own costume photo files in the Athfield Party archives. Collaborating in Wala, we consistently crossed each other's disciplinary lanes. Megan was as likely to delve into building design, construction, in fact, as we were with landscape. Megan also wouldn't hold back on traffic, engineering, construction, curation, most other things. But we were kind of used to that. Ath also wasn't good at boundaries. So Nicole provided this image from a recent, well, actually a few years ago now, Riverside project in Hamilton. The design process we shared was firstly a dig into the existing context with drawings like this, with the idea that the essence of a design is buried somewhere in the layers of the site, and then carefully scraping back, distilling, drawing things to the surface, then iterating, editing and critiquing to help an emerging design find its feet, its connections, its identity, the program relevant to that place. So although progressively revealed, nurtured and defended by the team, there was a sense the design had its own integrity. from early in the piece, independent from any individual on the team. And this approach provided a good foundation for collaboration. There was an intensity in those collaborative sketching sessions with Megan. It's a kind of skirmish of the pencils. Sketching, editing, overdrawing, and only the strong lines survived. Megan supported a degree of constructive tension to these sessions to help everybody dig deep. But debate was not territorial. It was always on behalf of the integrity of the design. It wasn't important who authored the lines that best revealed. It wasn't important who authored the lines that best revealed or advanced it. Having said that, Nicole and I were musing the other day that somehow Megan often ended up with the darkest pencil with the heaviest imprint. I've heard someone comparing design collaboration to playing tennis, firing suggestion and response back and forwards, but this was more like volleying, more like live volleying, everybody close to the net. It was very exciting. And some calmer time apart testing things with slow thought. And then pulling things together on the ground. Spatial, but often still relatively undefined between built structure, open, closed, hard and soft landscape. Meg's determination, passion and unrelenting care and defence for the integrity of a strong design through its life, and that was pre, during and after construction, was next level. A bit confronting to some, but inspiring to many others. Many projects scrape through on the back of that determination. Actually, despite Megan's determination, this particular project hasn't quite scraped through yet. So if there are any progressive Hamiltonians in the room, it's worth a try. It's still in the drawers, right, Nicole? The foundation of Waitangi Park drew heavily from these underlying historical ecologies of the city, basin and harbour edge. We've all become more aware of the cultural weight of watercourses and their damage, neglect in the urban environment. But in the 90s, although other places and people were doing work in this area, like Nicole and her colleagues in Oz, daylighting and filtration at an urban scale was relatively new here. And in Waitangi Park, the proposal met strong resistance from the out-of-sight, out-of-minders. The fear of mosquitoes, disease, smells, kids in the mud, and so on. And it was expensive. Ultimately, many people supported and enabled Waitangi Park, I think including many in this room. But elements like the graving dock, with its ambitious scale, terraced transect of the harbour ecology, just wouldn't have happened without Megan's unrelenting defence. And working with mana whenua, it helped Waitangi Stream and other neglected buried watercourses in Wellington toward regaining recognition and agency. Maury Love, in his resource consent evidence supporting the layers of mana whenua representation through design, made it clear that by far the most important thing culturally was to raise, re-express and re-purify even a small portion of the Waitangi Stream before it ran into the harbour. I'm racing through this. I'm conscious of 10. You're going to yell at me, Nicole, soon, right? Okay, right. Pukeahu was one of those projects that exemplified Megan's range. This was a massive collaboration that enveloped many of us at different times and multiple clients with different agendas over a long period of time. Its design foundation came from local buried histories and narratives around the site. It involved there's a list of things that was very, I guess, central to Megan's approach on these projects. It involved itself with city building, city repair on multiple levels, sometimes messy, and you're not mentioning Basin Reserve, extending civic ambitions initiated by the Dominion Museum National War Memorial, which had originally included a boulevard down the middle of Te Aro to Courtney Place. Te Aro had other ideas at that time. And it was a design systems approach from and for multiple layers to be extended by others, including progressive layers of memorial over time. In the last 10 years, some have responded beautifully to this system, others otherwise. It was both expansive an intensely urban, engaging memorial experience at the scale and spread of arterial vehicles, the image on the left, your left there, but sometimes other modes. Only once like that so far, but the template's there. And also intensely intimate, incorporating constantly maturing landscape with seasonal energy and colour that speaks so strongly of Megan. And it was incomplete and open-ended. While the project remains unfinished in some areas, it has a resilient backbone, rich with cues for future moves. It includes influence and possibility well beyond its boundaries, which seems a good place to try and round out this snippet of musings. So like many of you here, I miss Megan's personal presence deeply, but at the same time constantly aware of her ongoing influence and the agency she has given to people and spaces and places around the city. And I feel very grateful to have been one of Megan's mates and to have worked with her over that time on at least part of her massive body of work.
It's me. Kia ora, I'm Ralph. I'm a landscape architect, and I'll kind of fill in some of the gaps that Nicole and John have talked about, go over some of the same ground, but from a different angle. So yeah, like John said, I'm really proud to be one of the 5 names standing up here, listed as one of Megan's mates. My relationship with Megan had a couple of interesting chapters, really. The first is all about collaboration, and the second chapter was more about competition. I'm going to talk about both of those. But first, when the terrible news came through, I closed the Wellington studio, I think it was at lunchtime, and took everybody down to Taranaki Wharf. What did you call it? The wharf hole? I always thought it was called the cutout. Handy wharf hole. Oh, I get it. I was a bit slow. The handy wharf hole. And we just had a 2-minute silence at first. Just kind of strangely, beautifully separated from the city, just sort of the smell and the sound of the salty harbour. And after we'd all had a bit of a quiet think, I think I told some stories, some of my memories of Megan as a person, her contribution to the waterfront, to Wellington more widely, and actually I think to the whole profession of landscape architecture in Aotearoa. So it's nice, I'll share some of those same stories now, 5 years later, with a room full of people. So you got it right, Nicole. I arrived in Wellington in 2001 as one of the founders of the Landscape Architecture program at Vic. Came from Wales. The only person I knew in New Zealand was my Kiwi wife. The program was just me, Catherine Allington, and a blank curriculum. I think probably after just a few weeks, I was asked to give a public lecture on my master's research. The title was Skateboarding the City as a Playground. That's what I'd done. And I think that night was the first night I met Megan and Paul. I remember Megan being really interested in everything. She was very welcoming, she was very open. She was actually really quite intense, but in a strange sort of laid-back kind of way, laid-back intensity. Megan was really excited about the program at Vic, and she really wanted to help shape it. So, we started collaborating. I probably helped out with some things in the studio. I can remember working on a bid over Anzac weekend, that first year I was here. And Megan helped me out at the university in particular in connecting me with people and places. And that led to, once we got the program running, so once we had a studio in second year, I invited Megan in to do some studio crits. And she obviously jumped at that opportunity. She was an excellent critic, as you would expect, clear, constructive, to the point. She didn't grandstand like some other people did. She just told it how it was. But of course, she wasn't just there for the fun of it. She was there to spot talent. And Megan quickly had her eye on, where is he, Dickon? Very quickly had her eye on Dickon Round, who started working in the studio not long after as a student. The first of a very, very long list of students that followed that pathway as interns, student helpers, through to being employed as graduates. Around that time, was Gerald, the City Council launched the Chaffers Park Design Competition. It was an open competition, a little bit weird, with school kids entering alongside professionals, and there were hundreds and hundreds of entries. Somehow, that got eventually whittled down to 5 finalists. I was on the Waterfront Technical Advisory Group at the time, and along with Graham McIndoe and Linda Kirkmeester, we were tasked with making a recommendation to the subcommittee on these 5 final schemes. And of course, Wraights and Athfields were one of the 5 finalists. So in our professional opinion, we had a ranking of 1 to 5, with obviously the Wraight Athfield scheme as the best. The public were also given a vote, and it's been alluded to that not everybody was a fan of the design. And in fact, the public vote was the complete inverse of our recommendation. And I remember there was a big public meeting at Te Papa, and I think it was after midnight that the subcommittee eventually made the decision to award the project to Wraight Athfields. So yeah, what did someone say? A career-defining thing for everybody that worked on it. Yeah, as you all know, it was elegant, poetic, pragmatic response. We picked it because the central space was large enough to host big events. Pretty amazing for the Hikoi last year. With all the activities clustered in that zone along the edge, and the brief had like 920 different things that had to be in this park. And of course the huge wetland system, eco-source plants from the south coast, loads of cultural references. It was a really big leap forward actually for landscape architecture in Aotearoa. And the awesome thing was, while this was being built, I managed to persuade Nicole and Jeremy from Athfields to tutor in my new landscape construction paper. And that meant that the students could all get down to site. We had a few site visits and observed the creation of this park. When it was finished, I wrote a critique of it in Landscape New Zealand magazine. Me and Megan were mates. Chapter 2. At the end of 2006, the landscape program quietly imploded. I quit, and so did everyone else. So, guess who saved it? Megan stepped in. She wasn't just going to watch it struggle and even disappear. And somehow she managed to persuade her friend Penny, who Nicole mentioned before, Penny from Australia, to come and live in this amazing city and to take over the lead of that program. And she came with Martin, which was kind of double benefit really, because he both worked in the program and became a director of rates. So the program was saved. Our relationship took a bit of a turn when I joined ISMUS. So after leaving the university, I went back into practice, or as Megan called the practice, the enemy. She was fiercely competitive. So now we were bidding for the same work, and we were competing for the same talent. An ex-student, Nathan Young, who you saw on one of those group photos up there, I managed to persuade Nathan to come and work for me from Rates. And he did for a couple of years until Megan persuaded him to come and leave Isthmus and work back at Wraight's. So we had that sort of ding-dong. But yeah, I want to talk about competitions. There are 4 that I can remember. National Memorial Park, as it was called before, at the time. All of these 4 competitions I got shortlisted for. I think generally a shortlist of about 3 or 5 different designers. This one, I thought we came up with a really, really cool scheme. But of course, it wasn't the one that won. Megan and John and the team managed to do something that was just really, really smart and simple but beautiful. Oh, there was Hayman Park in Monaco. Same thing happened there. We pulled a couple of all-nighters. We had some awesome 3D renders. We thought we'd nailed it. But no, Megan focused on the plan. Hers was simpler, clearer, altogether better. Oh, then there was Cobblestone Park, just outside the architecture school, the space I knew like the back of my hand. This time, I thought, right, okay, I think I've figured out how she works. So this time I kept it really, really simple. No. Megan did it better. She won it. It's built. And then there was this one here, Frank Kitts Park. We came up with a contemporary Chinese garden, and it blurred into this waterfront park and a playground. But once again, we lost to Megan, who did it better. Somehow always managing to get that real magic balance of being inspiring, but also affordable and buildable. And these are the things that clients are actually looking for. The design competitions always say it's got to be the best thing in the world ever, ever, ever. But it's only got a limited budget, and you've got to be able to build it. So Megan managed to answer all the aspirational stuff and still come out with something that looked like it could be turned into reality, and most of these things have been. Yeah, she made it look easy. It was really annoying. No matter how hard I tried, it's totally impossible to out-design Megan. One year, I decided to enter our Frank Kitts Park competition design into the visionary category of the NZILA Awards. This category was for theoretical and unbuilt projects. Why not? I thought, get some use out of all the effort we put into that competition entry. So on awards night, big round tables. Again, this was at Te Papa. Megan and John, all the Wraight, our field crew, were sat on a big round table. At their table, they had the mayor and the mayor's husband, and they had all the clients from Wellington Waterfront, including the CEO, Ian Pike. This was the year that Waitangi Park was a front runner for the big awards. I was sat with Isthmus. Kumatoto was a finalist in the urban design category, but all of our clients were over there on Megan's table. Anyway, when the Frank Kitts Park entry was announced as a winner in the visionary category, apparently over at the other table, Ian Pike stood up and he went, "Shit, we picked the wrong one." Megan's project had won the competition, but we just won an award. So during the break, I was accosted by Megan on my way back from the bar. She was absolutely hopping mad with me for entering that project. And she gave me a huge telling off, and then she started kicking me in the shins with her big red boots. And I just stood there, incredulous, clutching my Heineken. You see, Megan was a fearsome competitor, and she was a fabulous friend. and things just aren't the same without her. Thank you.
Kia ora koutou. Yeah, thanks everyone for having me here. I feel like a little bit of an infiltrator. I'm an engineer, just to get that out of the system. So I'm probably one of those ones that Megan chastised and teased over the years. I grew up in the head of the Waitohi stream, up on the hills of Mount Koko. And so Wellington has been my home all my life. I'm a child of the 70s, and so I can well remember the waterfront before Megan sort of sprinkled a magic dust over it. And so we all grew up, getting excited when the Nissan Mobile race came to town, and you got to actually see what the waterfront was behind those big gates. But other than that, it was all closed off. I didn't meet Megan until later than a lot of people in this room. I met Megan in 2008. It was a Wednesday, and it was September. So I'd sort of drifted around the world for a long time, and then decided that I really needed to focus on how we can better protect the environment. And so I actually returned to do engineering as a 29-year-old. So I did engineering down in Canterbury, and I was all G'd up about saving the world, one drop of fresh water at a time sort of thing. Graduated, found myself working in Wellington for an engineering consultancy. And it turned out that saving the world, sort of one fresh drop of water at a time, was building gabion baskets in streams and spraying concrete on diversion drains around landfills and things like that, which was pretty disheartening. And so one day I was sitting down here at Waitangi Park, just thinking, shit, this isn't really what I want to be doing. And so I thought, well, I'll track down who's behind this jewel in the crown. And obviously, heard about rates and tracked down where rates was, and went up and just presented myself to Megan, and she was immediately very warm and generous and enthusiastic about talking about what was saying very special to her. And so then when I said, who are the engineers that worked on this? I want to work for them. She said, well, don't, in typical Megan fashion, don't piss around with the New Zealand engineers. You need to speak to Professor Tony Wong, who was a guy who'd been involved in that concept design and getting it through the consenting process. And so she gave me Tony's phone number, and so I went home that afternoon, rung Tony, and said, I've just met this lady, Megan Wraight, and she's given me your details. And by the Friday, he'd offered me a job, flew me, my wife, and my 2 children to Melbourne, 8 weeks accommodation sort of thing, and I thought, shit, I must have come across pretty good on the phone or something. But what it was that Megan was held in such high regard by all those people. So everyone here sort of knows Megan from Aotearoa and Whanganui-a-Tara, but it went much wider than that. So I headed over there, and that connection with her was really strong straight away. They were all, how's it going? How's Megan? It was people like Peter Breen and Tony and Sean Linster and Robin Allison. So I often reflect on sort of my careers. I couldn't have done it without that one connection that I made with Megan. So after 5 odd years, I came back to the city that I love, and the first person I sort of went to see was Megan, she probably didn't remember me, but just to say all those years ago. But it turns out that I'd also taken an office up at the police barracks. So little did I know, I was about 1.5 metres away from, at that time, Wellington's biggest construction site, which was another Megan and John special. So I was able to sit up in there and watch that come together and see what perhaps are the most bulletproof rain gardens on planet Earth. There's a lot of steel in there. See those come together. And so there, I might as well go into a different photo. I'm also an infiltrator, didn't have heaps and heaps of nice glossy photos. But yeah, so I spent a lot of time talking with Megan over the years on various projects and things, and the thing that really always struck me was her deep, genuine passion for the environment and Papatūānuku, and really ensuring that that the land came first on all of the projects that were lucky enough to have her fingerprints over, and that really resonated with me. Similarly, her passion for plants. I'm a bit of a plant nerd, so Megan shared that passion for plants and that authenticity with plants in terms of eco-sourcing and knowing te reo names for the plants that we all plant, and we tend to often think we still need to speak Latin, but perhaps te reo is more appropriate for us to be speaking when we're talking about our plants. So I hold a lot of those conversations that I had with Megan dearly, and yeah, she's sort of shaped a lot of the way that I think. But also, Nicole mentioned her zest for life, and I think everyone obviously would know Megan had that strong zest for life, and just mentioned with Paul, I had the fortune of bumping into Paul on the weekend, and dancing, and I also quite enjoy a good shake. And one time that particularly sticks into my mind was, I think it may have been 2016 or 17 at Cuba Duper. So me and my 12-year-old daughter, she'd sort of grown up on a solid diet of New Zealand dub and good music. And it was one of those years where Cuba Duper had a bit of rain, but the Sunday session, the forecast looked pretty good, so we came on our bikes. It was one of those days that it just cleared up and just started to steam. And we went to see Tikitane on Smith Street. And so Tikitane was doing one of his looping sets, and there were Paul and Megan in her bright red trowel and something very colourful, and a big beaming smile on her face. And so I'll never sort of forget those sort of serendipitous little moments when you sort of connect with people, which is always nice. But I think Nicole also mentioned guerrilla activities. I think it'd be fair to describe Megan as a punk. I think punk's the ultimate compliment you can have if you're willing to look at things and not feel that you need to follow conformity. So I think that Megan was such a good advocate for all things good, because you often have to challenge the norm to get those across the line. And so all of you people that have worked with her and worked alongside her would have seen that tenacity and attitude loud and clear. And the sort of the guerrilla side of things and just taking things into your own hands. Many of you won't be surprised that there was some issues with maintenance on many projects over the years, and Megan would never take that lying down, and had lots of battles, particularly with maintenance on Waitangi Park, holding people to account and things. In 2020, just before she passed away, we cooked up a plan to do some guerrilla gardening down in Waitangi Park. So I had a nice collection of koikoi that I'd propagated, and some mingi, and popped around to Northland and had a cuppa up there and took Megan into town, and we went down to Waitangi Park and did a little guerrilla gardening and popped some plants in there. Ironically, I think the maintenance sweep came through about a week later, and all the koikoi were just pulled out. But there are still a couple of little mingi in there that every time I go through, I sort of look at them and they're a fond memory. So I think that she's certainly touched so many people over the years. She's touched me very much professionally, but also just that positive energy and her ability to make people smile, and probably also be a little bit scared at times. And I think this maybe is one of her follies. This is the outlet to Waitangi Stream, and I often, well, not often, but fairly regularly go along there and get in there with a stick and poke it out, because it's a design that's hard to maintain. The thing jams up and it's stuck there. But when you get it working, it gives people a nice fright when you get the big whoosh of water. And so the whoosh fountain, I don't know, Paul, maybe that is one of her follies in particular, but it's a great little feature, I think, that I guess celebrates a bit of spontaneity and makes people jump. And that's I always think that might be Megan. Thank you very much.
tēnā rā tātou. Ke mi atu ki te mana whenua o te rohi nei. He tangi ana mō te hunga me tā tātou hoa e Megan kua rere ki te pō. Haere haere mō mai rā. Ka mihi kia koutou katoa kua hui mai nei I tēnei pō. It's been fantastic hearing these reflections from these mates. I'm very pleased I wasn't a competitor of Megan, but a collaborator, pretty much. In fact, probably when I knew that she was on the other team, I'd think maybe not worth going for. Megan knew her plants, her trees, and she had a great botanical knowledge, which was a great learning for me because I've come to also really love understanding our plants and knowing about them. And she also had this incredible capacity to shape and adorn space with form and with flowers. She also loved creating occasions for a dress-up. And some of you here, probably many, may have attended her 50th at Mount Lyford, halfway between Kaikoura and Hamner, which was in the winter. And I think Megan had 5 changes of clothes that evening, and the whole lodge of Mount Lyford Lodge, this is with snow on the ground outside, was themed Twin Peaks, it was. And so a party, she had endless energy, unending energy for partying. As John said, and many of the speakers, she's a wonderful collaborator. And I think that I did try and count them. I think we did about 28, 29 projects over a similar number of years. And I was just thinking the first time I met Megan, was actually at a winery project I was doing with friend Jonathan Waddy in Kaikoura, overlooking the big bay, the southern bay. And Jonathan said, I've got to get Megan to help us with this because it involved just some farmland and limestone hills with some grapes going in to do some buildings and some underground caverns. And I was really struck by just the confidence, the wonderful confidence of thinking that Megan had, and just this constant stream of ideas. And so over the years, I was really fortunate to have her as a playmate and a co-collaborator. And in many ways, it was kind of a unique collaboration, like you were saying, John, around sharing a page and pencils, and this sort of wonderful dance of drawing on the same drawing. And I also like placing trees and doing with landscape, and she loved doing buildings as well. And so I would put a tree down, and then the rubber would come in and move it slightly to the side, or it would just be another, like a bolder pencil. So that creation of design with hands on paper is it's not a common thing, and something I cherish about my projects with her. A lot of the work that we did together in the early years was around rural residential sort of projects and amazing sites. And she was a Mott girl, so she had grown up, well, in Hawke's Bay as well as in Motueka, and had a deep understanding of, this is a project in Kaiteriteri at Tokonawa. She had a deep understanding of the top of the south, of the ecology there, of the climate, of the landform. So those projects were really special to do with her. This was Spy Valley Winery in Wairo, and you can see this beautiful approach to the human part of this big factory building, really, for wine production, and all of these parallel wetlands running down and crossing over them, just and against the sort of the large sort of factory-like building, that attendance to water and proximity to it just makes that a wonderful experience. And the other thing, knowing about how Megan's sensibility, and on these projects that were sort of rural residential, that it was so much about the ground and the figure in the ground and the ecology and the siting, the prospect of sites and the aspect of the sun and the wind and all of those things and the topography. I would say to clients in my very first conversation when they were interested in us potentially working for them, that that we need to have Megan there too, and it not only like at the first visit. So I got into this habit of making sure that we were both there, and also had my wonderful collaborator at our office, Sharon Jansen. So on a number of occasions, we would have this great pleasure of going to a site and just taking in all of the aspects of it, and then siting the building, siting the garden, and making these initial sort of, just through arm sweeping and initial sort of responses to the program. And also there was this thing where if there were existing trees or existing vegetation, I would like to try and draw the house close to them if it was appropriate, if they were near that sort of the sweet spot. And often occasions, Megan would say, well, we need to get an arborist in to check the health of the tree. And it looked pretty healthy to me. So, but there was a number of occasions at Manatamariki as well in Palmerston North that the arborist would come in and say, oh no, this tree's not for long for this world. So this lovely thing that was going to be central to the design would come down, but we'd plant another one. So this is the house in Upper Muteri, and you can see the siting of the building not on the ridge, but just off the ridge, and Megan's amazing plantings around the building to ground it in the landscape. And she talked this client into revegetating a whole large gully, and then that's become a great joy for those clients, and we were just there the other day. We still have a great friendship and recall Megan often. Another project overlooking the Waimea estuary is Megan and the client Emily, and the same thing of just spending time identifying how to nestle habitation into these rural landscapes. And this particular house wanted to be very recessive, and making platforms, long platforms that with the topography, and finding that sort of the way of sculpting the land in the most subtle but effective way. This is another little building on that site. Megan was fair and needed a parasol, and of course it was strong in colour. And so these adventures into the environment on those kind of projects were very special memories for me. We did some competitions together. The top one is one at Parihaka, Stan's beautiful drawings. Another one was for the Christchurch Memorial with Ross Hemera, and evoking Rua Moko. These weren't successful, so I know what it feels like, Ralph. Also this project that was unbuilt, Poriora Forest for an aerial walkway, and we had this pleasure of designing a camping ground, so good children of the 60s and 70s know what camping grounds are about. And then in recent years, well, over a long period of time with Ewan in our office and working at the Wānanga and Otaki, and over time we've been able to transform the campus from having a car park in the middle and a whole lot of second-hand buildings to having these very Māori buildings, and making the people and Te Tai the nature, is the heart of the project. And the wonderful thing, even though we've lost Megan, we've got Nicole and we've got Wraight still to work with, and so many of these projects have been a wonderful collaboration with Wraight's. And the strong thing here, and Stu, also wonderful collaborator into this project, around how large areas of stormwater attenuation, rain gardens, really characterise the project. And Susie and I have a place up in Otaki, and many years ago we planted an orchard and we got Megan to help, and that, like working with the paper, was a contest of ideas, because I wanted the trees at least 3 metres apart so I could drive my tractor through it with a slasher on the back. And Megan would just, and Susie, they would come and they would just grab them and just move them in, so that it became really difficult to get the tractor through. And so, but the upshot of that is that a food forest was created that's now, what would it be, 10 years old and really flourishing. And when Megan was becoming unwell and working through her treatments, we had the pleasure of having Paul and Megan park their caravan up there. And so on this particular day, I was chasing Megan around, although she wasn't going that fast, and we had determined that a certain number of trees had to be taken out to transform a monocultural hedgerow. And so Megan would walk around with her stick and go, take that one out. This way. And so I would come around with a little spray can to identify what was coming down and what was staying. And then just the other day, one of the lovely things also about spending time with Megan and Paul has been in the connection of our whānau and getting to know Megan's family over the years. And we had Tim, her brother, who's a wonderful Māori carver, who trained, Pākehā, but trained at Motueka at Hawhina Marae. And he's made a pou and a pare for us at our new whare up there. So we had Tim there to unveil and put the pou up. And it tells the story of the koikoi, of the mātua, of Raukawa, the mana whenua, of the whānau, and of the creatures of the river and the creatures of the sky and the creatures of the ground. So whilst we've lost Megan, we've got lots of wonderful connections. Thank you.
Ngā mihi, kia koutou, kia koutou, kia koutou katoa, ko Jane Bieringa, Takawinga. I was very lucky to be invited. We were, I'd like to think, good mates, as the invitation offers. I feel very lucky to have been included in the life of Wraight & Associates, and Nicole, that's you too, thank you. I continue to enjoy those benefits and Nicole's generosity. You've seen Megan's work over the years tonight, and I'm giving you just a few yarns, and actually I want to talk about the olden days. So we met approximately 20 years ago when the team moved into the building where we were living. very quickly it seemed we were good mates and allies. Now Paul and I go up to the Makra Cemetery reasonably frequently, where Lute and Megan are buried, and they're sort of in quite close, they're quite adjacent spots, and we laugh because we think that they must chat to each other because they were not dissimilar in lots of ways. And I think we'd like to think that they shared some similar attributes, but they would be shocked at the state of the world today, I am sure. On one of those occasions recently, Paul likened Megan to Maui, and I thought, tried not to be too surprised by this, and he said, when he said this, and I scratched my head, and then I remembered I'd been refreshing my history recently and recalled an interesting perspective on Maui, which I'd read in a glimpse into the Maori. It's a text called Into the Maori World, a publication with multiple contributions that explores traditional perspectives encompassing cultural values, beliefs and practices. So Maui was the benefactor of humans, and through the Maui traditions it became evident that he concerned himself with practical and domestic matters. He also tended to do things the wrong way, which provides a justification for people to argue that tendencies to move away from the accepted behaviours are necessary in certain circumstances. So I sort of got that. Did I get that right? I reflected on this. While I don't think Megan did things the wrong way, she certainly did things very differently, which made her so bloody good and incredibly different. And so back in the olden days, now this is really, back in the olden days, I was part of the Waterfront Watch group, and I like to think we helped stop the proposed casino on the Taranaki Wharf, the Hilton Hotel on the Outer T on the waterfront, and the dinky housing development on the land which is now the wonderful Waitangi Park. Waterfront Watch were invited to voice opinions on the design entries, and the proposal from Wraight stood out for its difference, not a gated community, but utilisation of one of the few flat open spaces of recreation left in Wellington, and it was for everyone. And so the park really acknowledged all those many things that had to be included in there, but I was sort of blown away with it because it was just completely different from everything else we looked at. I look at that park every day and enjoy it, and I wish it was cared for in the spirit in which it was created. So I'll skip a bit here because people have talked about the extraordinary the Waitangi stream that comes down and used to go into the harbour dirty, but now goes through that incredible filtration system and comes out as clean water into the harbour. So as you can see, I hold Megan in very high regard. Oh, can I put that image up? Sorry. Am I going right? Yeah. There we are. Sorry. So as you can see, I hold Megan in very high regard. She was good company. She was inquiring. She was really generous, visioned, and with a great sense of humour. Then the other qualities. She was cheeky, a firebrand, fearless. She celebrated creativity. Where did all these wonderful qualities come from, I asked Paul, and he suggested some were hereditary and others came from her very liberal upbringing. Michael and Megan's parents were educated in quite a remarkable time post-World War II, where we saw the most mammoth shifts in education philosophy Aotearoa had ever experienced. This was under the influence of Gordon Tovey, the educator who worked with Prime Minister Peter Fraser, and Clarence Beebe, the Director of Education at the time. Gordon and his team of artists and art specialists fostered the lively and colourful classrooms that New Zealand is familiar with today. They established a bicultural and art-centred education system, which was in really strong contrast to the rote learning environments preceding them. So as you've seen from the projects you've witnessed tonight, Megan thrived and excelled and left a wonderful legacy for all of us to benefit from. Additionally, she was always up for a challenge. Sorry. Sorry about that. And I remember TVNZ were calling, I was working in documentary at the time, TVNZ put out a call for proposals for series, and so we thought we would come up with an environmental series. And I just read Jeff Park's amazing book, which I'm sure many of you will have read. So Jeff and Megan and I were going to put the series together. And it was really looking, I'm simplifying it down, but it was really to develop a series that looked at sort of pre-colonisation and what New Zealand may have looked at. And we've got remnants of that, a number of remnants of that in New Zealand. However, needless to say, we found it more interesting than TVNZ, sad to say. So I didn't really work with Megan. And then, God damn it, I'm jumping ahead now. She got sick. She wasn't well. Things went wonky. And slowly a diagnosis was delivered that she was untreatable by the public health system. The condition was too advanced. This was pretty shocking, but knowing Megan, she wasn't down for long. She researched globally. She consulted widely. She underwent surgery in Auckland, groundbreaking techniques and trials in Japan and Australia. But I am sad to say it wasn't to be. She fought like hell. She gave it her very best shot. Bloody sad for someone so young and with so much to give. Her charming immediate family and devoted team cared for her and spared nothing. She got the best out of everybody, which really fully demonstrated what she'd put out into the world, which we are all benefactors of. This photo was taken on a trip to Mana Island, a photo from Rowan Atkinson. I organised a trip. There were 8 or 10 of us, and we had this amazing day out there. So I look at Mana, you're going along the motorway, and you look at Mana, and it just looks like a sort of sugarloaf. You get out there, it's cliffs, valleys, it's fabulous vegetation, originally farmed, and thanks to the pest-free work, the planting is absolutely thriving. It's just extraordinary, it's wonderful. So we've all had a good time. So ending in a chipper note, I really wanted to say Megan knew she was unwell when this photo was taken. It can't have been that long, actually. But anyhow, I just think she's an incredibly good-looking woman, inquiring, inquisitive, and out for the best. Always out for the best, not for herself, but for absolutely everyone. I thought she was really remarkable, I thought. So thank you, Nicole, for inviting me to remember Megan. Matariki is a time for reflection and remembrance, celebration, and to look forward to the future. And I hope this charming image of Megan is how you will remember her. I'm sure you all miss her as much as I do. We need more people like that. Moi mai rā, e Megan. Moi mai rā. Tātou, tātou e, tu tera mai nā iwi. Tātou, tātou e, ngā rakataka, me te aroha iwi. Kia ka kapatahi, kia kotahi rā, tātou, tātou e.
It's not long now. Massive thanks to tonight's speakers, John, Ralph, Stu, Hugh and Jan. I think between us, we've maybe covered 1% of Megan as a person, as a colleague, a friend, and perhaps a formidable foe, Ralph. It's impossible to do someone of Megan's calibre justice I've got written here an hour talk, but I think everyone knows it's gone a little bit over, apologies. But I was really enjoying what everybody had to say, and I got a little bit lost in people's words. But I'm not sure that was the point of tonight's gathering, to kind of give you all of Megan. I think perhaps it was more about taking time out to actively and collectively show our respect, appreciation and fondness for a cheeky, wee, freckly-faced redhead who dared to dream and, as John knows, was unaccustomed to sticking to her knitting. Thank you, everybody. I think there's stuff at the back to eat and drink. Or maybe Tina's going to tell us, no, just eat and drink. Yeah, I think we'll just, I did say that we might open the floor, but I think it's probably better if we just share our recollections informally. Thank you.